Hi, and welcome to the Starter for 10 podcast. I'm Marnie Karmelita, Artistic Director of 10 Days on the Island, Tasmania's statewide arts festival. Join us as we get to know the creative minds who'll come together to create our festival in 2025. Get to know the person behind the art form, follow the journey of a work as it is created, or spark your own creativity and curiosity as we delve into and around culture.
Well, Marnie Karmelita, here we are.
Here we are.
In beautiful Nipaluna, Hobart, but we're super lucky to be able to sort of be here buried within the Hedberg to have a chat as part of the Starter for 10 Days on the Island podcast.
That's right.
Which is just a fantastic way of introducing us to some of the extraordinary artists that you are engaging with and having conversations with and whose work we will experience next year. And we've put you on the spot because normally you're interviewing the artists,
yes,
and this time we're going to get to know you. And I know that with Starter for 10, you normally start by reading the bios of the artists, so strap yourselves in. I'm going to read yours.
Lovely.
Marnie Karmelita is an international arts curator and producer with 25 years' experience working in venues and festivals in Australia, the United States and New Zealand. Marnie was appointed to the role of Creative Director of the New Zealand Festival Trust in 2018, co-leading that organisation's creative vision and strategy across the entire portfolio of festivals and events, including the biennial Aotearoa New Zealand Festival of the Arts, the annual Wellington Jazz Festival, and the biennial Lexus Song Quest. Prior to this, Marnie was Programming Director at Brisbane Powerhouse, leading major special projects and festivals, including the inaugural IRL Digital Festival and Wonderland Festivals, as well as the established WTF, no, it doesn't stand for that, World Theatre Festival. In the United States, she was responsible for developing and leading an annual multi-art form program reflecting contemporary arts practice at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill as Director of Programming of Carolina Performing Arts. With a passion for working together with artists to nurture new works and stretch the boundaries of performance, she believes the arts are transformational and make an inordinate contribution to our society. She particularly strives to bring audiences closer to the artistic process so we can all tap into our creativity. I want to tap into your creativity, Marnie. What a remarkable bio that is.
Thank you.
Remarkable because you know, you look all of 29 and I can't believe you've done so much.
Thank you very much.
Citizen of the world, Marnie Karmelita, where's your hometown?
My hometown is East Fremantle, actually, in Western Australia, on Noongar Budja there. And in fact, I was born in the Windsor Hospital, which I ended up living in the street next to. So I really was kind of born and bred in that little city of East Fremantle. So definitely an ocean girl. We lived very close to the beach, and the Indian Ocean, I think, runs through my veins in a way. I love being close to the ocean. I love sunsets over the ocean, and they're very special over there. So that's kind of my little part of the world. But in fact, my mum grew up in the wheat belt in Western Australia on the family farm, and she went to school there till boarding school, year 8, I'm guessing, if I look back. But that farm is also part of my heartland as well, and my maternal grandparents lived in a little town called Wongan Hills, which everyone thought was Wandon Valley. Did you remember watching A Country Practice?
I was in A Country Practice.
Were you? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Fangirl. So my mum grew up in Wongan Hills, and my younger sister and I would go and stay with our grandparents every school holidays. And my cousins, my mum's brother, my uncle and auntie and my cousins lived on the farm, so we would spend a lot of time there. And it is also a very special place in my heart. Every time I'm there, I really feel feel connected to it, even though, it wasn't a place that I spent every day, or it just, it's part of my world. So that, those two places, I would say, the Indian Ocean and Wongan Hills, are really the places that remain in my heart. That said, I haven't lived there in Perth since 2011. I moved away. So I do feel like a bit of a citizen of the world, for sure. And I have tripped around to, New York, North Carolina, Brisbane, across to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and finally back to Lutruwita, Tasmania.
Well, you will take us with, we don't even need our passports. You're going to take us on some of that journey. I just want to go back to Wongan Hills.
Yes.
Because it frankly sounds idyllic, and I trust that it was. And it's wonderful too, I think, especially for people who are keen for the arts, to also have had exposure in different landscapes and different sort of passions and pursuits and businesses and things like that. And so knowing that your maternal grandparents were based on a farm.
Yes.
Was artistic expression something that also had its place within your childhood?
Very strongly, because actually my mum became an English literature teacher and is an avid reader and loves language. So I grew up with that in my household. And in fact, I think I have all of that built in from me, in me from mum, I should say. I love reading, I love language, but she was also, at the time, taking her high school students to see theatre shows. So she would get an extra ticket, and I started seeing a whole lot of theatre at quite a young age, really, and I just loved it. I really wanted to be on the stage. That was what I wanted to do. And I'm so grateful to her for introducing me to that world. It really spoke to me. And I don't know, is it inherent in you? I'm not sure, where do we find these things? But definitely a love of language, a love of reading, a love of the arts has come through her from this farm girl, But she left her family farm when she went to boarding school, essentially. And, I don't know where she found that love of literature, but that's certainly where I got it from.
But you did ultimately go to, famously, WAPA, the West
Yes,
Australian
I did.
Academy of Performing Arts.
Yeah.
Was that in the pursuit of getting onto the stage?
No, I had come to terms with not being on the stage before that. I ended up being one of those, what our colleague Vernon Guest, the CEO of 10 Days, calls a bunhead. So I became obsessed with classical ballet, and I was doing, classes 5 or 6 times a week, and good old mum was, she was my taxi service all through primary school, and then all through high school, right through till, I think, year 11 from memory. And I loved it so much. So my desire to be on the stage was to be a ballerina. But I went through puberty, and that was clearly apparent that I did not have a ballerina's body, nor even the skill, the turnout or anything. But I loved it, so I just kept doing it. But no, I went to WAPA actually knowing that, it was never going to be from a performance perspective. I kind of dabbled in the idea of doing stage management and behind the scenes. But then I found that WAPA had a course called Arts Management, and I thought, I'm quite good at math, so, I'll do that course and I'll kind of go behind the other side, the dark side, as we call it, and, become involved in the business side of the arts, which was essentially the degree. But I do remember going to the open day of WAPA when I was in year 11, year 12 maybe, and saying to the head of the arts department, arts management department, saying, I want to come and do your course next year. And at the time, they were taking 20 people per year, and it was based on interview. Marks were a part of it, but, such a small part of it. And he said to me, "You're too young. Go away and do something else. Don't apply. You won't get in." So I thought, okay, well, I'll go and study at UWA, the University of Western Australia. And I had a grand old time, and then went back 3 years later and said, "Right, I'm here now." And he took me then, so that was lucky, wasn't it?
It was. I can't believe that. So you've got sort of like a double degree.
Oh, yeah. I have 2 BAs, which is quite funny, I think, to be in the world with 2 Bachelors of Arts. One is probably enough, but I did a history and English double major at UWA, and really, I guess I just immersed myself in things that I really loved.
Yeah. Your mum must have been thrilled.
She was thrilled. She went there as well, as did my dad. It was great.
It's really significant, though, I still think, it's not the only path, of course, but to get into somewhere like a WAPA or a VCA or a NIDA, it does speak to the singularity of ambition that you need to have. It's a real statement of, no, I'm serious about this.
Yeah.
So when you emerged from WAPA, what do you think were sort of some of the kind of the key qualities or skills that are still in your little kind of bag of tricks and tools?
Look, I think you're absolutely right. They weed people out pretty quickly, don't they? And you're not coming into this world for the idea of making the big bucks down the line. So the course at WAPA was fantastic because there were units dotted throughout where you had to clock up a certain number of volunteer hours in different organisations, and that it really tried to give us a real sense of what it was going to be like coming out the other side. I think it was really interesting being at WAPA and being part of that arts management clan, because we were the other in the school. Everyone was, on the stage and really training to be a star, and the school was really enamoured with that group, and then we were off to the side. Maybe a little bit snooty and thinking, well, we're the ones who are going to make it happen.
You better be nice to us.
And do you think that divide still exists? I don't know. Sometimes I think that it's still there. But, I came out and was really, really determined. I think you come out with that determination, and emerged into the land of the Festival of Perth, which I did a 10-week secondment as part of my final semester. So I kind of found myself in the Festival of Perth and started working in the marketing department. And I was so lucky because they offered me a contract the day after I finished my internship, which was, it was pretty amazing, really. And I thought, what a great course that, it's kind of funneling you towards a network and, meeting people and, potentially finding a role. I was very fortunate.
You're probably the first of your year to be in that position.
Absolutely. And then, I nearly didn't graduate because we were supposed to write this big 20,000-word report on our experience, and I just went straight into working, and the festival was in February. And I remember the head of department, Bruce, calling me and saying, "I really need you to turn in the report." And I just said, I'm busy. I was actually busy. I was also mortified. But I said to him, I just can't finish it. And he said, "Just bullet point it and hand it in and we'll get you through," which he did. So bless him.
Bless him.
But yeah, I kind of got bitten early by the festival bug, which I think if you talk to people who work in festivals, it's really hard to step outside of that experience, especially growing up in Perth, which is, obviously an isolated place. And I'd grown up on attending festival shows. My wonderful mum took me to see so many things, and the international work coming in just blew my mind. And of course I was seeing work all through the year, and I was seeing, all of the incredible West Australian companies and artists as well. But to have these really extraordinary experiences every year, I just was a sucker for it. I loved it. I loved it so much.
Is there a moment from a particular production that still lives in your heart?
There's quite a few from that time, I think. I remember when we brought a show, I can't even remember the company. This is terrible not to remember the detail, but we brought a show which was about the Titanic. It was a European outdoor theatre piece, and we kind of built this big stage and audience space for the work, and it was one of those kind of crazy European street theatre-y feel numbers, and the boat starts to sink, and suddenly all of this water pours into the space. So essentially we filled up this space with water.
Wow.
Stuff like that is just so incredible when you're on that side of it, and you know how it's happening, and it's all quite mundane in a way. It's ordinary things, but the stage magic I find really incredible. So those kind of experiences were really amazing. Seeing Castellucci in Perth was really amazing. Romeo Castellucci, the Italian director, I don't think we've had many directors or artists in Australia who make that kind of work. So the imagery that he used of such scale and so challenging in a way, I found really great. I loved the work that really made us feel uncomfortable.
Which I think is going to be a really interesting thread in the work that you've championed and sought and went on to do. I was certainly struck that, you've worked in marketing, you've worked in publicity, sponsorship, audience development at Black Swan Theatre. You've really worked at the coalface in diverse, what we might loosely term as sort of arts administration or arts management roles, obviously. What were the insights from your exposure, whether it was Black Swan or the International Festival, that you learnt then that informs sort of how you work and how you lead a team as artistic director?
It's really interesting because I think, the marketing experience, the PR experience, all of those different roles, first of all, really galvanised me and clarified for me that I wanted to work more closely with the artists to make the work. But it did give me a really good sense of, I guess maybe helicoptering up above the work and remembering that it's a two-way exchange. There's an audience in the mix as well, and that it's that kind of transaction between artist and audience, or the work and the audience, that's the thing that we're actually presenting. And so having that insight into how an audience might see a work, or how you might describe it in order to entice an audience to see it, I think has stood me in very good stead as I've worked alongside artists. I guess I just have appreciated having an holistic understanding of a show from the page right through to putting it on the stage, to trying to tour it, to, the whole process has been very insightful and useful for me, I think, and hopefully for the artists that I work with as well.
It's not every artistic director has kind of had that, desk bound, but very much a critical cog in the wheel. And
we all
has a role
come
to play.
from different, different sides of things, don't we? And, you have the artist as artistic director, and I've worked for some incredible artistic directors in that world. And then I think that artistic directors of old, I kind of have been thinking a lot about of late. They have tended to be in the past, the older gentlemen, shall we say, and, just this idea that they were the arbiter of good taste, which I find really interesting. But, our culture has shifted massively since those days. And, I'm thinking about the wonderful David Blenkinsop, who was at Festival of Perth when I started there. He was in that role for 23 years, and it's just incredible to think that one person might, hold on to that role, and he brought extraordinary work from all walks of life and all parts of the world. And, there was a kind of great trust, but as our kind of culture consumption has diversified and actually got quite niche, I think, I think that, that kind of larger than life, one artistic director voice for a very long period of time, it doesn't really serve us anymore. So I think my experience does serve us now, for the now, and then we will pass along to the next generation, of course. But I am very much about putting the artists first and really elevating their voices, because I think what artists have to say to us in this current time and place is really important and really needs to be heard.
Was that something that you've experienced in any of the places that you've worked where you saw that modelled to great effect?
I think actually working in the States at Carolina Performing Arts, and maybe this was also about where I was at in my life, but the director there at the time, Emil Kang, it really impacted me how he would go about gathering artists to put together a program, often around a really big and quite niche idea, and that he would galvanise people and get them excited about this crazy random idea, like the Rite of Spring, for example, which we did a whole year on. And I kept thinking, this is crazy, that this is a 100-year-old work of quite difficult listening in terms of the music. And then, we also delved into the visuals of it and that ballet. And yet it was seminal because it really represented a kind of schism or break in terms of culture at that time and what people were consuming. And, it caused a lot of controversy because people really hated it when they saw it. And, so this kind of crazy idea that we would create a whole year's worth of performances around the Rite of Spring and ask artists to respond to that work, which I think they were all really excited by. But then we got the audiences there as well, and they wanted to talk about it and why it had been such an important piece, not just at the time, but then, as you kind of track through the modernist movement. And so I think Emil really showed me that art could lead the way, and that and that working with artists, you could really kind of shift people's thinking and change what they maybe thought. I guess what I'm trying to say is that they might have thought, I would never connect with such a thing, but you can do that with artists. Artists can really excite people and take them in a different direction of thinking, of feeling, of action as well. So yeah, it was really there, I think. And he always used to say, come back to the artists, we're here. He was very selective, he wouldn't work with artists who didn't necessarily excite him in terms of what they were thinking, but the ones that got him, he would follow them. And I just watched and learnt from that. Yeah.
And it seems like that clearly illustrates just the primacy of the idea, whether the idea then becomes a concept and then the concept informs, like just frankly, the luxury of being able to just dive into, into the Rite of Spring for 12 months.
Exactly.
Amazing.
And, you know, we sat within a university context. So that was the reason we brought the academy around that idea. And so we were able to connect into so many different departments, history and the arts and performance and literature and music and all of those worlds, and bring them around this idea, which kind of gave us the rationale, the justification for really going deep. But the series only survived through the generosity of donors from the general public, and then audiences. That we had a huge student audience, and that was great. But actually, it was the general public coming in and engaging with those works who really kept us going. Yeah.
Oh, what an extraordinary experience. I have to backtrack though, Marnie, because I'm really interested to know because you could have easily been still working in Perth, been working in the Perth Festival. Yeah. So what was it, where did this impulse come that you wanted to actually test yourself in a much bigger place like the United States?
I think the United States was always in the back of my mind because I really liked the literature. I really liked American writing, and in Perth, a lot of my friends and peers were heading over to the UK to do that, that journey, I guess, that sabbatical. And I don't know, I had the sense of wanting to look to the new world rather than the old world. I just had this sense of wanting to look to the States, which was not so close to us over there and was not so perhaps present or known. I certainly didn't know any people there, but I knew a lot of people in London and the UK. Maybe I just didn't want to do what everyone else was doing. I also had this sense of, I needed to get out of Perth in order to extend myself. And I could see that it would be very easy to stay there and to kind of track through a certain career path. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to really have a different experience. I wanted to be a little bit closer. Everything felt so far away, and I wanted to be a little bit closer to I also wanted to be closer to Europe. And, it's still an 8-hour flight from the States, but it is closer than your 25 hours or whatever you have to do from Perth. It was definitely this sense of, which sounds silly, doesn't it? Because, North America and the States is still a kind of older colonial experience than Australia was, but it felt newer to me than the UK, which is where everyone else was headed.
Well, I love that you were prepared to go against the grain. And, of course, you really committed because it's not easy to work in the States. No. And you did it through the green card lottery.
I did. I got a green card in the lottery, and so I thought that was a bit of a sign.
I think that's a sign.
And I had found this organisation, this program where, if you pay them a small sum of money, they would commit to submitting your application for the green card at the right time, because there's this little window of time when it opens, and they would submit it each year for 4 years at the right time. I got it in the second year because apparently there was a preferential number of spots for Australians that year. So anyway, I just thought, well, I've got this opportunity. I've got to go.
You got to go.
I've got to go. And it timed quite well. Working in festivals, you work on a cycle, of course. So I didn't want to leave before delivering my role at the Perth Festival. And in fact, it timed beautifully with the end of the then artistic director's term, Sheila Magadza. So I felt good about that. I felt like I had kind of stood by her and supported her till the end of her festivals in Perth, and that I I could head off with a kind of free heart after that.
Yes. And so when you arrived, it was New York City, I think, that you went to.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, who doesn't want to live in New York City?
Of course. And was there any hint of work? How did you manage to line up any work?
I didn't know anybody. And so my strategy was, okay, I'm just going to go out to everybody I know and ask them if they know anyone in New York. And I kind of had, my story goes that I had about 6 months worth of savings. Well, I reckon I had less than that, and my mum helped out a lot, which was really wonderful of her. It was. But I did say, look, if I can't find a job within 6 months, then I better pack up and go home and figure out something else. So I just started reaching out to people who knew people I knew. And I ended up, it was actually excellent because I ended up kind of traipsing in and around not just Manhattan, but, the rest of wider New York, the boroughs, kind of finding these random strange places of someone who was a set designer for this theatre company and I just talked to lots and lots of people. And one of the people that I connected with was an artist, agent, manager at one of the big agencies, IMG Artists. And she said to me, oh, there's a job going in Chapel Hill in North Carolina. I hadn't really heard of North Carolina. And she said, you should talk to the director. And so I'd had a couple of interviews before that, just putting my application in. And I'd had some good chats, and I'd been ushering for the Lincoln Center Festival, which was amazing. But, I think I earned all of $7 an hour after tax. It was crazy. So it wasn't for the money, but I got to see all the shows, which was great. And, I talked to Julia, and she said, you have to talk to Emil down in Chapel Hill, which I did, and we hit it off. It was just great. We had a great chat. We liked the same artists. But then I had to go through the formal application process, and I think it took about 3 months till I finally got the job and made the move. So it was kind of 6 months to the day, and I found myself in this little town called Chapel Hill and, just figuring my way through a new experience, I guess. Threw myself into, they'd just started their season, so I started in October, mid-October. And, of course, they start their academic year in September. So their season had started in September. So I'd missed the first few shows, and then on we went from there. It was amazing.
When we think about the United States and we think about how, we're very familiar with American culture, obviously, American
screen culture,
cinema, culture and history and their aesthetics and their values. It speaks to us. But what did you, in your exposure to actually sort of working in somewhere like North Carolina, what did you discover, if you like, that sort of, again, has been something that just made you thrilled to be there, to be able to go, I was there, I contributed to this?
Yeah, it's an interesting culture. It's in the southern part, in the south. And I think that that's a whole different experience, especially after being in New York,
yes,
which is the big melting pot. And I found people really friendly. I didn't have any of those issues. But North Carolina, Chapel Hill was also a kind of little enclave in the wider state because it was built up around a liberal arts college. So, of course, that was its world, and I felt like I was amongst friends who valued culture and the academic world, and that all felt really good. But I certainly could get a sense that as you kind of drifted out of that pocket, that there was quite a different life experience in North Carolina. And what did I take away from there? I really what I really loved, and I hadn't been able to express it, I don't think, before I moved there, was that certainly the people that I was working alongside and you know, living in and among, really valued intellect and thinking and culture, and you know, you could tell that there was this appreciation of that, and that it was okay to express that. And I think coming from Perth and maybe broader Australia, but certainly my experience, I didn't always feel that it was okay to be really smart, and that we really did value that. You know, often there's a move and kind of natural shift towards sport, or in terms of prowess or appreciation or acknowledgement. You know, I think that's our experience here across the board. And so that was great. I really loved that, you know, that we could have those conversations and you could kind of proudly declare that you were that kind of person rather than a sporty person, which clearly I wasn't. And that was excellent, you know, just being able to throw myself into that world. North Carolina also blew my mind because I met so many people who, you know, those surveys and things where they say that, you know, such a small number of the American population has a passport, for example. I really felt that there. They thought I was incredibly exotic. And that kept jarring with me. And I remember going into a hardware store one morning. The smoke alarm in my house had started beeping, you know how they always do at 2 a.m. or whatever. So I'd had no sleep, and I went to the hardware store first thing to get batteries, and I said something like, you know, where are the batteries? And he said, oh, where are you from? Are you from France? And I just thought, I cannot believe that you would think that this accent is anything other than Australian. I used to get everything South African, New Zealand, of course. But, yeah, France
now
was...
French.
Oh, my God. And, I would talk to people who I knew who, you know, one of my colleagues and friends, her sister-in-law, brought me into her history. It was kind of social studies high school class to just talk about, you know, not being from that part of the world. And I remember talking to her, and she said, I have no desire to leave this county, let alone this state, let alone this country. And I can't believe that you have moved your life all the way across the world. So real conservative kind of values, as well as this extraordinary value placed on thinking and the arts, and that was amazing. I loved that.
Oh, fascinating portrait, and I can't help but just reflect on obviously we're all sort of watching the next, what is it, some 50 odd days until the election in November, and trying to wrap our heads around the electoral college system and so on. And you must, you know, with the friends that you no doubt still have in North Carolina, you must also be thinking about that sort of mindset around who they are and their identity and just what we're about to face. It's the choices that they're going to make.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Of course, a lot of the people that I was working with and hanging out with are self-professed Democrats. And I've had a couple of chats recently, you know, in the last few months, and there seems to be, well, pre-Kamala, there seemed to be this sense of almost acceptance. Oh, you know, here we go again, and it's going to happen again. I think I got a message from a mate in LA just after the debate. He said, did you watch the debate? And he was so excited. And I thought that was really, really lovely. You know, no matter where you stand on the Kamala Harris continuum. But yeah, I was so glad to see them kind of galvanised. And, you know, it is a crazy land of extremes. And that's one of the other reasons that I really enjoyed it, because it's, you know, there are such opposing ideas and forces at work, and it's fascinating to kind of negotiate and sit between them.
So you're there again, working closely with artists and working closely with cultural leaders to have those difficult conversations that you kind of crave. What was it that made you go, I've worked so hard to get here? Again, you could have stayed there, but you didn't. So what
it was
it
family who
back?
brought me home,
Yeah.
and my sister had her first baby, my nephew Theo, and I met him and just fell in love with him. And also at the time, my two surviving grandparents, one from each side, were both getting older and more frail. And I think one of the last trips that I did home door to door, it was about 36 hours. And I realised that I was a very long way away if something were to happen suddenly. So I decided to come back to this part of the world, and was lucky to land a role at Brisbane Powerhouse, which enabled me to, make the move back as well. So that was pretty amazing in and of itself. I did miss the States. It took me a long time to kind of process that. I kind of jumped into the decision to leave and found the job, which it took a little while. I was looking around for a bit, but then it all happened really quickly, and all of a sudden I was back in Australia, which was a bit of a mind shift. Yeah.
So what was your role at the Brisbane Powerhouse?
I've had lots of title changes everywhere, but I ended up as the programming director. I think that's right. So heading up the programming / producing department, and I had a team of about 5 or 6 producers, and so we were responsible for bringing in and then producing, for want of a better word, the some 1,000-odd events that happened in a year at the Powerhouse at the time. It was the workload was crazy. It was just intense, and I came into the role with the directive of working on these kind of little mini pop-up festivals, but it ended up stepping back really from working so closely with the artists and really just managing the team who managed the artists.
I can't believe that sort of scale of
crazy
of activity,
Yeah.
and particularly perhaps for Tasmanian audiences who'll be listening or observing this podcast. Can you describe sort of what the Brisbane Powerhouse's mission is really?
I mean, the Powerhouse itself is an old power station that was converted into a number of different performance spaces from, I think it opened in 2000. And so they had a big main theatre space, and then a smaller theatre, and then little studios and pockets in and around which they would present all kinds of events, multi-genre, really different arts experiences, which was kind of wonderful. The Brisbane Comedy Festival lives there, for example, and during that festival, it takes over every little part. So a meeting room is turned into a little theatre space, and they just take over every pocket of it. There's free music gigs there was at the time free music gigs on Sunday afternoons. It was just a venue that kind of lived and breathed all kinds of art, and I remember doing that reporting that year, and realised that individual events, and obviously at some days you've got multiple venues running, and I was like, oh, no wonder we're so tired. We've just done a really hellishly extraordinary number of individual events in a 1-year time period. It was you felt like you were on the run, that's for sure.
Running on adrenaline as well.
Yeah.
Did you have a strong sense that Brisbane really kind of were proud of the Brisbane Powerhouse? Or I can't comment now, but like, did those audiences that attended the comedy festival or that obscure circus company or whatever it was it because all roads led to the Brisbane Powerhouse, that people were excited about what that venue could offer?
I think it was a real mix. So people loved the venue, and there was certainly a crowd who moved in and around the orbit of the venue and kind of came to play as well as see shows. There were a couple of great bars and restaurants there, for example, or they'd have free activity for little bubbers. So, the mums would bring their little ones down on a Tuesday morning and there'd be an hour of activity, of kind of artistic activity for these little ones, and then they'd go and have coffee afterwards, or whatever it might be. So it felt like a drop-in centre in a way for artists as well, because when spaces were empty, we were trying to offer them to artists to say, you've got a show you want to make, here's the studio, have the space, and we'd figure out a deal. We were doing lots of deals, figure out a deal and ways to get artists into all the nooks and crannies so that it felt like a really active space. But there were also times where perhaps we had chosen to present something that didn't land or connect, and then it was crickets. So it was also about the work that was in there, which it always is. It's a bit of a mix of the two. I do think people in Brisbane love that space, and actually I was there last week and it was great to see it in full flight with people coming in and out and buzzing around. And they have the markets on Saturday mornings. So, those kind of things really draw people.
It does sound like a hub.
Yeah.
And it sounds so vibrant. And I love the way it's also working for different generations and offering different sort of activity. And therefore it quickly just sort of becomes, it's not something that's for someone else and it's not for me.
That's right.
It's
part of your life.
It's part of my life.
Yeah.
So how long did you have the energy to stay at the Brisbane Powerhouse before you went across, as we colloquially say, the ditch, across the Tasman? What took you there?
I was in Brisbane for 2 years. I think it was almost exactly 2 years, and that I was exhausted. And I think probably moving countries and then throwing myself into that, the two together really did me in. But also I think because of the sheer hectic schedule, I wanted to go back into the world of festivals, which is a different kind of frenetic pace. But you do have time to kind of step back a bit, and then you're in the fray, and that seemed pretty appealing. But also, my old mate Sheila Magadza was the artistic director there, and I thought it would be pretty great to have the chance to work with her again. So I was able to get there in time to present her final festival there, which was amazing. It was amazing to work with her again.
It's such a beautiful country, and it's beautiful to look at, and it's but it has its own sort of distinct culture, distinct communities. What was the role that you were sort of doing, and again, how were you finding ways to keep building those critical paths both to audiences but also to artists?
I think it's quite interesting when you deliberately put yourself into a new environment or land in a new place, because I think you have an obligation to throw yourself into that world. And so, everywhere I've landed, I've really tried to take a yes approach. So if I'm asked whether I'd like to do something, I say yes before I even think through what it might be. And that's how you meet people, but I think that's also how you get to know a place and its people. So I started there as the head of programming, kind of very similar roles to what I'd been doing at Carolina Performing Arts and at Brisbane Powerhouse. So heading up the producing team, and working alongside the artistic director to deliver the program. It was a really interesting one, I think, because I think international arts festivals often offer audiences maybe a reason to step outside of their comfort zone, that they feel possibly, what's the word, that they can take a chance, that they can maybe risk something that they might not ordinarily see. They do feel like out of the everyday experiences. And so I love that about festival audiences. And that felt very familiar to me in terms of the Perth Festival and that experience. But then, of course, you have this extraordinary Māori and Pacific cultures, which those first couple of years I was just really scratching the surface and learning about. And I think even since 2016 when I landed there, things have shifted and changed and progressed so much. And, through our organisation even, we started to have Māori classes, language classes, and the organisation had already been learning and singing songs, waiata, as part of their welcomes, artist welcomes and so on. But we really did start leaning more in that direction, and that was a pretty extraordinary experience. But I felt, it all shifted for me after my first couple of years there, because I was made the creative director of the organisation, and that happened because the executive director person changed over, and I had Meg had been in the organisation for a while, and she asked if I would kind of come alongside her vision for the festival, which really was about starting to think differently about what an international arts festival could be, and how it could shift up its offer. And we talked a lot about the fact that, certainly in our region, so across Australia and New Zealand, you could open the printed brochure of any of the festivals and it wouldn't really matter where you were. It was kind of similar programming and a similar look and feel and a similar way of connecting with audiences. And so we thought, well, what if we were to do things a little bit differently and really try to put Wellington on the map and get people talking about what we're doing. And we came at that from the artist's perspective. So we decided that we were going to invite some pretty major artists to curate a series of works in the 2020 festival. So that was the first festival that I led as the creative director, and we introduced guest curators, and it was really about trying to kind of create a disconnect and a new way of engaging and connecting artists and audiences, and it was crazy, but it was really amazing. We ended up working with an incredible Samoan-born, New Zealand-based opera maker and kind of dance theatre maker, Lemmy Bonifacio. So he did the first week a series of works. And then Laurie Anderson did the second week a series of works, and then Brett McKenzie, who's one half of Flight of the Conchords, and he's a Wellington boy, so he was like a hometown boy. He did the third week, and in and around there, we kind of had no idea how it was going to roll out, but we just made it happen on the fly. And so we figured out pretty quickly that in and around that, I had to also program works. So wrangling these kind of three very different personalities and trying to bring out their best in terms of what they wanted to do in that space and link it all and make it make sense. And, we definitely broke it up, and some people really hated it. Others really came on board, but then, it all crash landed with the COVID lockdown that year. So we managed to get through all but a day and a half of the festival, but it really was coloured by that starting to creep into our world as well.
Wow, what incredible timing! What courage!
Yeah, it was. It felt very brave, and we had a hunch that it would cause ripples among old festival people who...
This is how we've always done it.
Who've been with the festival. And you don't want to discount that. You know, those people who've been coming back year on year, they're incredibly important, and they have such a kind of sophisticated palette when it comes to work, because they've been there every festival and they've seen so much themselves. But, yeah, it really felt like it needed to shift and that we could step out in front and lead the way. And it was quite interesting because we started seeing guest curators pop up. We weren't the first by any stretch of the imagination, but it really seemed to become part of the zeitgeist, and you know, we started noticing lots of organisations in and around New Zealand starting to take up that idea of, well, actually, what if instead of going back to that idea of the one artistic director voice, what if you had a few voices? And that seemed to better represent where we were at in terms of society at that time as well. That actually, and, you know, it was happening in media too, that actually, you know, one person's program was not necessarily going to reflect all the different groups of people who might want to come along and see something.
Because you were giving diverse voices.
That's right.
That autonomy to be able to sort of...
That's exactly right.
Okay, this is going to speak for me, or speak for others.
Yeah.
Did you find in that creative director role that you sort of had to absorb a sort of a plethora of other roles because you were having to you were turning over new ground, you were also having to deal with sort of three very distinct curators, and so, you know, you were both counsellor, you know, treasurer, you were both sort of like cultural leader, having to be a mosaic of different people for different purposes?
Very much so. And even, you know, for those three different people as well. So, yeah, you know, for one of them, I was counsellor and really trying to bring that person along in terms of, you know, embracing that opportunity and trying to convince them that, yes, actually people are interested in what you might like to present in this space. So, yes, it was an interesting process, that's for sure. And that creative director role became something quite different, I think, in and around those curators, but in a good way, And it was a profound experience by the time we all got to the end of it, that's for sure. Yeah.
I could only imagine, well, give me more of this. You know, this is exciting. You know, we're sort of we're stimulating here. We're looking to sort of turn sods and keep going. But I'm not sure how many more roles happened after that for you, or how your role evolved. But I am conscious that we need to also bring in Lutruwita, Tasmania, and discover again where was your curiosity? What were you intrigued about that was the right time, the right timing in your career to find yourself here leading 10 Days on the Island?
It was really interesting, you know, when the role came up, and I had come through that incredible kind of shift in terms of how an international arts festival could work. And then we got hit by COVID and lockdowns like everywhere. And so we ended up having a 4-year stretch then between festivals. So biennial festival over there, 2022, which we did put together, was cancelled pretty much completely. We did manage to do some things, but then coming through to 24, we felt like we had to kind of return to base, return to the foundation in order to get people back on board after such a big long gap. The organisation had also gone through an immense bicultural journey, which I alluded to, and so I was also working alongside a director of Māori and Pacific works and artists, and that shifted and changed. But what I ended up kind of thinking about was, okay, how can I kind of take some of these ideas and experiences and really delve further into this idea of shifting up the way that we do festivals. And I think when this job came up at 10 days, I thought, it's the really kind of perhaps small or out of the way or, unique places that are not part of a kind of bigger picture or, I don't know, a different place where you're able to have a bit of a play. And I felt like the biennial cycle and time frame of 10 days would really allow us to delve into some of these kind of bigger, longer conversations that I wanted to play around with, or putting the artists forward. And that's exactly where we've come to in terms of our 10 artists, 10 days. Really starting to introduce audiences here to the artists as people and their practice, and talk about, instead of kind of popping up for an intense 10 days every 2 years and what's this work and, will I like it, or that we've actually had this longer conversation, and audiences will come into the festival with a bit of a sense of who they're going to see, what kind of work that person or company might produce, and even the backstory. I think backstories are really important, and I think in festivals, partly because, you are working hard to get everything locked away, but we've often held on really tight to what we're doing and then kind of blast it out for a very short, intense period of time. But it seemed to me that this was a beautiful opportunity to actually open up, be a bit vulnerable if you like, but actually tell the stories behind the works, behind the festival, and really start to build a community around 10 days. So that, I just wanted to pour all of those ideas and things that I'd been working on and different experiences and, residency models, and always the models of how do we kind of get to the deeper conversation. The guest curators were that as well, a guest curator selecting 6 works. Why those 6 works? How do they intersect? What's the story here? That's what it was for. So I wanted to get into the stories, and I felt like this was the place to do it.
Now, I believe you've made that cross across the Tasman Sea with your partner and your dog, Charles.
Yes.
Who is a German short-haired...
German wire-haired pointer.
German wire-haired pointer. Have you all made friends on the Northwest Coast?
We have made friends, yeah. It's really... it also really suited us in terms of our little family, because we had been looking to perhaps be a bit more remote, to step outside of a kind of urban centre. And Glenn is from... the South Island, from Nelson he grew up, so that's quite a small place in and of itself, and the coast, we all love the ocean and being by the sea. I have to say that Charles is the only swimmer amongst us though. And so landing on the Northwest Coast has been quite extraordinary, because it is one of the most beautiful places. We kind of wake up every day and think, oh, wow, this is amazing. I feel like I'm back amongst my people, which I literally am. And New Zealanders are so lovely, but they're so very nice. And often I think, but what do you really think? And I know that an Aussie will always tell me what they really think. So that's been great. And Glenn's been great. He was up for an adventure, and he actually said that there were 3 places in the world that he had on his list to possibly live in: Tasmania, South Korea and Scotland.
Oh, wow.
So we've ticked that one off.
Yay. Well, don't go too far away yet. I need to just find out a little bit more about you before, reluctantly, I know we will have to wrap this up. I was struck with, because I've noticed that the Booker Prize is kind of bubbling, and the author Rachel Kushner, she's recently been nominated for the 2nd time for the Booker Prize, and writes in the tradition of the great American novel, which I thought was interesting in light of Chapel Hill. And she once, this is a quote of hers, that to do that, as in to write in the tradition of the great American novel, you have to be really interested in the historical moment in which you're living. And I think that really applies to you, Marnie. What's occupying your thoughts right now?
I really struggle to not be completely preoccupied with everything that's going on in the world right now. And, from the moment of landing here 6 weeks before the referendum, which blew my mind, having been out of the country, away from, of course I'd been back and forth, but, not having been in it for such a period of time. And I felt such a sadness as I was kind of grappling with understanding where we are as a society at the moment, and coming from the Aotearoa space, which I think, is a little bit further along in terms of bicultural relations, to put it as bluntly as that. So that preoccupies my thoughts. Of course, the world politics, I think, across the board, but the US really seems to be a kind of flashpoint of all that is bad about democracy at the moment. So I think about democracy. I have been thinking a lot. I've been doing a bit of reading around the media and this idea that because of, our technical world and access to the internet and so on, that everyone is now essentially a journalist. And so we've kind of lost that code of ethics that surrounds the profession of journalism, and that leads into all of this kind of hate speech and trolling, and that happens a lot to us in our world, in the arts as well. So that really preoccupies my thoughts, but also I love beauty, and I really try to find moments of beauty or descriptions of humanity, I guess, and that can often cross over into the natural world. But I think I'm really obsessed and mostly in love with humans, and really like to find the good in people, in all of us. So that's where I like to live. Yeah.
What you said just then also reminded me, Roxane Gay, who came out for Festival of Dangerous Ideas.
Yes.
An amazing quote where she says, "We're all hammers looking for nails." And I just sort of feel like
amazing?
It's just such a volatile, yes, it's where's this anger kind of coming from? Where's this eruption of where people are affronted by slights?
Yeah.
And
yeah. It's a hard one to grapple with, isn't it? Because I think, if you have had a creative life, or you've lived, through the arts as we have, we've been so used to using this form as a way to open up discussion between opposing views or opposing ideas, and that doesn't seem to be something that we are very good at doing at the moment. The opposing views or opposing ideas, it doesn't seem to be safe to have those conversations, and so I think we're shutting them down. But we must strive to continue to create those spaces without the rage. And I know that the rage for some people comes from such a deep place of trauma, and that's really hard. But let's offer those people a voice, and kind of all try and tap into that experience, and walk a mile in someone else's shoes, I guess.
Yes, yes, indeed. I'm going to wrap up reluctantly, Marnie, with just one last. It's a statement of fact. Well, you certainly shared this point that really I did not see coming, and that was for someone you're so clearly passionate about big ideas, about how we bring audiences together, and I talked about the primacy of the ideas and the artists who generate them. But I did not see you as a huge Jane Austen fan. But so you claim to be. Is that true?
I am indeed. I think she's amazing.
Yes.
I think I have always with me her 6 published works, which I have read in the order of writing rather than the order of publication, because I wanted to have that experience of her development as a writer and an artist, which is something that I'm really big on, watching artists progress through their careers and through their practice. And I think she's just so smart. She was able to create those works and to publish under her own name as a woman in a world which was really not open to her. And I just have huge respect. I love her sense of humour. I love a period costume drama.
And who doesn't?
I'm going to admit it.
I'm with you there. I'll see you on your couch on Sunday night.
Absolutely.
For whatever's coming up on the period costume drama.
Yeah.
Gosh, Marnie Karmelita, I could easily talk to you for another few hours and then some, but I think we will wrap it up. I would have loved to have perhaps given the tiniest peek towards 10 Days on the Island, March 2025, but you're already starting that immersion, because we're meeting 10 artists, 10 days,
right.
and that's starting to, I'm sure, whet people's appetite. So that will all unfold.
It will indeed.
Thank
you. Thank you so much, Jane. And yeah, I think I really hope people will join us on this journey as we continue to really bring artists forward, tell their stories, and get people excited about the works that they're going to bring.
No doubt they will. Thank you, Marnie Karmelita.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks for joining us on Starter for 10. If you'd like to know more about what's coming up at 10 Days on the Island, visit www.10days.org.au and subscribe to our free newsletter.